Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third CTE Wellness Gathering. My name is Nicole Martone. I'm an English teacher at Danbury High School. I'm also a Portrait of Danbury Graduate Coalition member and a recent PhD graduate with my research interests in supporting positive school and student learning climates. And I have someone with me this evening.
And hi, my name is Carolyn Weiser. I'm an English teacher at Simsbury High School, and I also serve as the Cultural Competency Instructional Coach and co-chair of our School Culture Task Force.
Our objectives today are to develop strategies for self-regulation, the ability to change one's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and physiology in service of a desired outcome, and to develop strategies for connection, the ability to build and maintain strong, trusting relationships. So you probably, if you saw the last wellness gathering workshop, you probably are familiar with the first two skill sets here from the University of Pennsylvania's Resilience Skill Set Framework. And those were self-awareness and strengths of character. Today, we'll focus on self-regulation and connection. So for us to get started, we are going to begin with this do now. What I'd like you to do is on a piece of paper, write down what are some of the current self-regulation connection practices that you have incorporated for both you and your students. This is a time where you can pause the video, reflect, and share those ideas that you've written down with the participants that you're with today. Welcome back. We are going to briefly talk about the mood meter, which was also introduced in the last wellness gathering. This is from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And with this mood meter, this I have used as a check-in for my students, as a do now at the beginning of class, just to see where they're at and to provide them some strategies to help improve their energy and pleasantness if needed. There is also a link attached here to the slide that has a brochure that accompanies it about some suggested strategies from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. So, for example, if a student's in the red and feeling irritated or angry or stressed or anxious, you can suggest that the student write a persuasive argument advocating for something he or she believes in. If a student's in the blue feeling sad or discouraged, disappointed, depressed, or bored, this could be a good time to work on a project independently, something that would require some proofreading, editing, or critical thinking. So if as an educator you feel like you can't perhaps suggest strategies that you think would be really helpful, or you're not sure, or you want to suggest additional strategies, this brochure is very helpful for that.
Zooming in, let's take a moment to reflect on where our own mood is right now. Feel free to pause the recording here so that you can scan the moods and see where you personally find yourself right now. I'm going to guess, given that it is just about May during one of the most challenging years ever in any of our careers, that you might have chosen tired, fatigued, drained, or something along those lines. Perhaps you are concerned or anxious about the state of the world, the nation, the educational system. If you are on the green or yellow side of the mood meter, good for you. But for many of us, we need to deal with the fatigue that we are dealing with right now. Thus, our first focus will be on self-regulation, the ability to change one's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and physiology in service of a desired outcome. Identifying emotions is an important first step in this process, but taking that identification and being able to reflect and take action to make the situation better is essential to the well-being for people of all ages. So how do we get there? We focus on teachers first. We need to remember that we're simply older human beings. Much like our students, we're continually evolving, and as CASEL notes in its framework for building SEL competency in schools, adult capacity must be strengthened before we can truly promote such competencies in our students. If you've ever flown on a plane, you know the announcement that parents should put on their own mask before helping their child. Obviously, if the parent can't breathe, then they can't help their child. So too, teachers need to prioritize our own metaphorical breathing. Before we can help our students to change their thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and physiology in service of a desired outcome, we need to think about those desired outcomes that we as teachers need for ourselves, for our classrooms. The outcomes we may want is to feel stronger and more in control of our environment and our craft. And if we do that, then hopefully we'll be in a better position to help our students self-regulate as well. So let us pause for a moment of reflection. What have you found most draining, either in the time of COVID or simply just as a matter of teaching? Jot that albatross down. Is it the grading? Is it having time to create new materials? Giving feedback? Something else? Talk for a couple of moments with your colleagues and think about what is the emotion that you most associate with whatever this part of your job is. So, what do we do with that emotion and the part of the job that causes it? I read an article in the March Council Chronicle entitled, "We Need a Return to the New, Not a Return to the Normal," an interview with Cornelius Minor, educator and advocate for equity in the classroom. While Minor's focus is on equity work, and his message is very clear about how we need to dismantle systems that make us tired from a physical and moral sense, I realized that his words also made sense in talking about teacher self-regulation of our emotions. If a situation is making you tired, it's time to innovate. If you look at the quote, Minor says, "I think about liberation in the sense that rest is radical in a three-dimensional way. If something fatigues you, then some of your rest has to be innovation. When you innovate, you dismantle the thing that fatigues you. That's what freedom is. I'm not innovating because I'm not tired. I'm innovating because I am tired. If I don't innovate, I'm going to go back to the same thing that made me tired in the first place." These words really resonated with me when I was thinking about teacher emotions, because vacation's coming up, and some of our rest has to be innovation. We don't often get the time to innovate the rest of the years we keep up with life, but during the summer, we can reflect on what was most fatiguing and find solutions that make the future better. I like to think of summer as an opportunity to get off the hamster wheel of prep, teach, grade, repeat. And I like to think of summer, in addition to being a great time to spend with my family and go outdoors, as a time in which I can give myself permission to reflect so that when I come back in September, I'm building on my successes and maybe skipping over some of those more fatiguing and draining experiences because I've had a little time and a little distance to figure out how to do it better. More is not always better. If we've heard one phrase in the past year and a half, it's that teachers have got this. But some of getting this has resulted in just more and more hours of work as we build new systems. So part of our own self-regulation can be to build in our own systems to take about the time to think about how we can work smarter and not harder. More hours of work doesn't always make us better teachers. If you look at our turtle here, right? He's figured out a way to use a skateboard to get the same place, but in a faster, more efficient way. But it's easy to fall into old patterns. And who doesn't want to fully embrace vacation? But I suggest that it can actually be restorative to allow our minds the freedom to reflect upon how to make our next year better. It's a behavioral choice to allow ourselves some time to think about work over summer. And at the same time, it is a behavioral choice to consciously regulate how much time and when we use some of that valuable time to improve our future outcomes. We don't want to perseverate all summer long and encroach upon our much needed relaxation. So we need to build in some systems that help us. Thus, I bring you to one of my favorite phrases: stop, look, listen. We all know this mantra of road safety. It was taught to us probably in elementary school, but it actually works for emotional regulation as well. Try to stop and think about what the future outcome you want for the next year's teaching. Sometimes we don't even give ourselves permission to actually stop. Look at your schedule. Look at your summer commitments. Listen to your heart about what is best in terms of allowing yourself to have some meaningful time for reflection and action. And then the next step is action. Do it. You might even click on your Google Calendar or iCal and pencil yourself in. We tend to prioritize that which we write down, so write yourself down. You deserve it. You could even take a moment right now to pause and click on a calendar and pencil in some time to allow yourself this reflection. So now let's think about what we're looking at. There are two kinds of innovation that can make your future teaching life better. One is what I call the happy accident, when we accidentally discover a new way of doing something that makes our classroom and our own mental health better. Think of the story of penicillin. An accident in the lab led to innovation by a scientist savvy enough to realize it. I'm sure each and every one of us has had a happy accident during the time of COVID. We did something in order to deal with the challenge of virtual hybrid teaching, and we discovered that it was actually pretty darn useful for our normal. So now the true magic comes in remembering to do it again. Thus, we need to actually make sure that we think about that regulation of ourselves, that we don't just keep doing the hamster wheel of continuing on, but that we actually build our own system to retain these moments. We have to write down our new strategy in our lesson plan so we don't lose the new technique. For example, one of my personal self-regulation strategies is that I spend a few minutes at the end of each day updating my lesson plans to reflect on anything good that happens. And because I keep my lesson plans in Google, they're there, and I make those changes in bright, bold letters, so I'll remember to think about them when I'm doing my new lessons next year. So that way I can go right ahead at 2:30 in the afternoon, click on my September lesson, and I can add in an innovation that I discovered in April if it's going to make my future September better. Your system might not be mine. Part of self-regulation, though, is building in the pauses, reminding yourself that you need to jump off that hamster wheel of perpetual motion and give yourself time to breathe, reflect, and hold on to your innovation when it happens. It doesn't matter when the pause comes, whatever works for you. For some of us, it's early in the morning. For some, it's late in the day. It might be on the weekend. What's important is to build yourself a structure that helps you to be the teacher and person you want to be. You might want to pause this video and book yourself some time in your calendar for reflection. I suggest penciling it in for the first week of September and see how it feels. You also need to remember to share your happy accidents with students. These are another moment where we can model self-regulation so that the self-regulation of teachers helps the self-regulation of our students. When we have an aha moment, it's a great chance to model the benefit of a growth mindset. We expect our students to be open to new ways, knowing that such a mindset will help them grow. So let them see your willingness to regulate your own emotions, your sense of frustration when something isn't working out, and your willingness to change your own behavior when a solution is at hand. Model regulating your own emotions and let them see that your frustration sometimes actually turns into something good. The second type of innovation comes from applying problem-solving skills to the challenges that plague us. Those challenges that, if addressed, will lead to better outcomes for our own mental health and therefore for our own students. While I'm going to use an example of helping students through this process, it works exactly the same way for us as adults. We've explored in our earlier sessions helping our students through SEL check-ins that allow them to express and process their own emotions, and these check-ins provide a window for us to see when there is a problem. Part of SEL is definitely helping students be more successful and at peace in their interpersonal interactions, a respectful and productive discussion, for example. But we also need to provide support as they navigate intrapersonal situations, those situations that occur within themselves. So much of life, whether in school or beyond, involves getting stuff done. And it can be hard for us all to self-regulate in order to be more successful as our emotions get in the way of our goals. Yet when we are successful, we feel better about ourselves. So when an SEL check-in reveals a student who is highly stressed about work, a follow-up conversation can be useful in helping them learn the tricks of the trade to self-regulate. Same goes for us, only we have to build in our own reflection times. We've all felt like this picture. I know we have. I can remember a time in 9th grade when my daughter felt exactly like this picture. She had an English teacher assign a 2-week summative thematic assessment. She slaved over that essay, and the day it was due, her teacher announced a second summative assessment due in 48 hours to stretch their mind, and she looked just like this. She crumpled, unable to fathom how she could do this again. I asked her to stop before she jumped in with both feet and put too many hours in doing another version of what she had already done. Then I asked her to look inward and listen to her own emotions, to pay attention to what was really bothering her. In this case, she had the dueling fear of not being able to perform at her customary high level, coupled with her anxiety about time management and how she could even pull it off in this time. Once she had stopped and listened to herself, she had identified the issues, and she was then able to listen to herself and think about how she could solve this. She could brainstorm some other ways to deal with the task at hand. And she ended up coming up with a creative expression as an alternative to another thematic essay. Then the final step was for her to actually implement this new idea in service of the desired outcome, a strong performance and a more relaxed mental health state. Fun end of story, she got a higher grade on the second assessment than she did on the first one. And we need to do the same thing for ourselves. We're not going to have a social emotional check-in typically, unless we have a department supervisor who's wonderful and does that for us. But we sometimes can be very aware of when we start to feel like that, whatever is causing it to happen. And so we have to remind ourselves to stop, look, and listen to ourselves. We can apply the same principles to our entire class. For example, we can think about a skill that our students struggle to do correctly. Being able to handle academic tasks independently is indeed part of our social emotional learning, and sometimes we notice there's a pattern that many of them are struggling with the same challenge. We can then reflect on the reasons why our students may not believe us when we make a suggestion with a certain learning strategy. What could be the emotions that are getting in the way? This reflection could even be part of a weekly social emotional check-in as you notice that something is going on. Then think about what are the behaviors that we as teachers, as adults with maturity, know will actually help them to reach those desired outcomes, both academic and behavioral. Students are much more likely to feel frustrated when they struggle with an assignment and don't get the grade they want, but they might not actually have the savvy to realize the skill that's going to help them get there. So we can help them move through the process and see the emotional benefit. For example, students might not like to take notes. They think it's boring. They think it's time consuming. Whatever emotion might be getting in the way. They're frustrated. They don't know how to do it right. But we as adults know that if they can master that skill, they're eventually going to feel much more successful and powerful. So we have to walk them through the process. So what we do is we model self-regulation for our students. We demonstrate each step of the way the emotions that might crop up and what we can do with them. So thinking about that note-taking idea again, we can scaffold such a skill. We can ask them to think about what are the emotions that make you not want to take notes? What's getting in the way? Stop, look at the process, listen to yourself, and let's think about how we can pick a strategy that's going to work better for your emotions. We can also make sure that we repeatedly make connections to the end product, because students often don't think about how the task today is going to help them a week or two from now. So we can show them how to associate a positive emotion to what seems like a chore. But we do have to make sure when we are designing our unit that we've designed it an end product that truly aligns with the note-taking process so that the connection becomes clear. For example, we might create an exemplar for each step of the way so that they can see the effect of changing their behavior. For example, if you're writing a character analysis, you could model each step of the way with a character that isn't on the list for a final essay, so the class can see how your changing behavior results in a more positive emotional state with an essay that nearly writes itself because of those effective notes. You can ask them, what don't you like about notes? And then throw out different types, right? You can use sticky notes. You might have study guides. You might have a framework that they use. And you could model all three so that they see which one works for different types of people. And then if you stop at each step of the way, they're going to see those notes growing slowly without a tremendous amount of effort, chapter by chapter. Whereas if they try to go and, do a whole book's worth of notes at the end, they're going to find it frustrating and they're not going to do that. So pause for a moment. Note-taking was my example, but think about what is a language arts skill that you or your team that you're with right now would like to see your students become better at in terms of self-regulation of their behavior. Can you identify the thoughts and emotions that get in the way of their successes? Can you identify the behaviors that would help them to get to a better place? Can you identify a strategy that might help them to regulate their emotions in the face of the challenge? When you're ready, you can advance to the next slide. And let's not forget those physiological needs that are indeed part of self regulation. Sometimes what's bothering kids is that they're hungry or tired. Us too. How do we help our students and ourselves to process how to self regulate physically? We need to take care of ourselves. When we're well rested and fed, we tend to be more functional, both in terms of achieving goals and interacting with people. But we need to build in the habits of taking care of ourselves. And one way to do that is to think about, you guessed it, summer vacation again. It's a time to start building those physical habits that make you feel better all day long. Perhaps you might begin with 10 minutes of yoga. Perhaps you want to start thinking about what a healthy breakfast is for you. And if you have 2 months of building those habits over the summer, when you have more time to prioritize them, you're more likely to maintain those habits when the school year begins again. And thinking about how we can help our students to build those skills of self-regulation, we can use those SEL check-ins to help them think about what kind of physiological care is missing in their own regimen and ask them to set some goals for self-care over the summer too.
Next, we are going to talk about connection, the ability to build and maintain strong and trusting relationships. So the focus today will be on relationships between teachers and parents, teachers with staff, teachers with students, and students within their classroom community. So I'm going to begin with teachers with parents. We want as practitioners to develop consistent communication with home about class happenings and student performance, and when necessary, in the native languages of parents and guardians. So this can be in a variety of ways. Emails, if emails available, through newsletters, perhaps monthly newsletters from your class happenings, phone calls home, if you have the services available like Language Link or Language Line services to translate into the home native language, that's really important to be able to do. You can email out or post in your Google Classrooms short videos such as screencasts. And positive notes, emails, and phone calls home are also really important too. We don't want to just be contacting parents about the perhaps negative things that might be happening, like his or her child not doing well or not passing. But if something is happening that shows a student's success, that's really important to communicate too. It does help with morale for the student and for the families that are dealing with this challenging time of COVID and all of the different changes and home dynamics that need to be contended with. So the next slide. So what I tend to do with my students, particularly in person, is I use carbon copies, a quick notes home rather, of things that are going well for that student during that time in class, whether it be something I saw during the week or that particular lesson. And it's something that I have a record of. It also can be posted on the refrigerator. So you could do this digitally via an email, but also a handwritten note. It means something sentimental too, I think, for the child and for the parent. Teachers with staff. So I'm sure you've heard the phrase, we're all in this together. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It is okay to be vulnerable. We are all experiencing this new normal. And so it's not just the new teacher or the beginning teacher who may need help. It could be the mid-career teacher, the veteran teacher who's also learning how to navigate teaching in a hybrid model or a distance learning model during this pandemic. There may be a colleague who is skilled in an area, such as a new technology tool, who can help you with your unique situation. So ask around in your department or in your school, or ask the administrators, is there anyone you know that you can point me to who's really good at this particular thing? And I'm sure there'll be someone that can be recommended. Also seek mentorship if needed. The CTE has a mentoring program that Carolyn and I run and facilitate. You can always reach out to one of us. There's also platforms like Twitter and Facebook where teachers are sharing resources. I've used Teacher to Teacher if I'm looking for a particular strategy, and this is on Twitter, and what they do is tweet out your question and you will get hundreds of responses. It is so neat to hear what people are doing nationally and internationally in that area that you're interested in. On Facebook, there's AP English Lit and Comp members group, as well as high school ELA teacher support group that I have personally used and I've shared resources in, and that you may also find valuable. And there are many others. Just do a quick search. I'm sure you will find some really excited people who are in the same situation as you, who are willing to help. Students within the classroom community. So at the beginning of the school year, it's really important to develop collective classroom expectations. So I have my students make suggestions for those expectations, the behavioral and academic expectations that they would like to see in their class throughout the year. So being that we are in this hybrid model, many of us, I have my students use Jamboard and they put their suggestions on sticky notes. And then I compile those suggestions per course into a Google form. And I ask the students to pick their top 5 to 7 choices, and they can offer some phrasing revisions. And I display this in the classroom. So this is a sample Google form. Again, where I'm just taking their suggestions. You'll be surprised how many students will suggest the things that you are wanting them to do, like be in their meets on time, take turns when speaking, respect each other's ideas and opinions, be responsible and accountable for their own work, hence no plagiarism or copying each other's homework. Do your best on assignments, manage time effectively. This is music to our ears, right? So they come up with the things that we want them to do. So what I do is in my physical classroom, I would display the top choices. I would determine the top percentages that were selected. And I would, again, put it on a whiteboard in the corner of the room. This is what I included on their weekly planner for this particular course. Again, these are the top 7 choices. And it's a reminder for them. They see it every class and go through the planner that these are the things, these are the behavioral and academic expectations that they selected. Again, it creates a classroom community, it creates ownership and accountability. And that's definitely something that we want our students to take hold of and feel a part of. Students with classroom community continued. So students will most likely encourage academic risk and trusting safe spaces in the expectations that they suggest, but you can also do this through the following. Using sentence stems and frames to encourage dialogue and participation. For example, in group discussions or in fishbowl discussions, especially for students who might not be the ones who are always raising their hand or volunteering responses. This will give them some confidence on how to frame their ideas, and it provides some accountable talk frames for them as well. Use cold calling to ensure you hear from everyone in the class, not just those high flyers who are always raising their hand, whether it be in the meet or in person. Ask follow-up and clarifying questions. I don't accept just yes or no answers. I want to know the why. And again, you want to incorporate discussions and debates whenever possible, just so that you can hear those diverse perspectives and encourage them to share their perspectives and to respect those diverse perspectives in the classroom. And you also want to ensure that learning is appropriately rigorous. And so, even though we are in this new normal, and for many of us, we're doing our best to get through the curriculum and make sure we're hitting those standards the students need to be successful in school and in life. We always want to make sure that we are incorporating the rigor necessary for them to do so. So teachers with students, you want to get to know your students. You should use interest inventories at the beginning of the year, as well as, I know this year SEL is really important. We want to incorporate those check-ins like the sample do now or a couple do nows that I had shared in the last presentation, where we're just seeing, how they're doing, how they're feeling in the morning. The mood meters are a great resource as well. Greet students by their first names at the door. when they're in person is always a nice thing, that the first person they see is you and your smiling eyes with that mask on. In the virtual meeting, when they ring to come in, I do my best to make sure that I greet them individually and that I'm pronouncing their names correctly. So at the beginning of the year, ask the students, am I pronouncing your name correctly? And, phonetically, how should I be saying your name? So that they feel that you are paying attention and, listening. And there's different pronunciations from depending on student backgrounds. So, that's important to pay attention to. Giving students choice as well, so they have an opportunity to show their learning through multiple intelligences. Choice boards are really helpful here. Know your students' skill levels. So some students might need to have extensions to be pushed a little further to be challenged. Others might need some scaffolding. And so even though we are in these digital spaces working and teaching with our students, we can still do this. Sometimes I have move ahead and catch up days where I'm providing scaffolds to the students who still need it, and I'm providing extensions for those who are ready to move ahead. Ask questions about things you know are important to your students' lives. So typically through their do nows, I learn about the things that they're doing, the athletic teams that they're involved in, the games that they're playing on the weekend. And then Monday, a student might say that he or she is tired, and I'll say, well, how did that game go? Did you get a W? What happened? And the student starts talking about that experience. And it's just another way for them to realize that you do care about them, you are paying attention, and it develops those really solid connections. Self-regulation and connection are really interconnected here. So these pillars, these components are not mutually exclusive. One way that we can see the interconnectedness is in terms of self-regulation connection. If a student is struggling in the class, for example, doesn't understand what's going on or seems to be, drowning in something, you can redirect the student to that expectation that was established at the beginning of the year to ask questions if you need help. This definitely helps with self-regulation. It teaches them those skills, those resilient skills to get through challenging times and obstacles. Maybe your students came up with demonstrating perseverance and grit. So if if students are giving up and that's one of the classroom expectations, you can point out, perseverance is something that this class really values. What can you do to persevere and get through this assignment? And suggest strategies. Students can suggest strategies, and they often do support each other in these positive ways. Completing work on time also can help with self-regulation. If that's part of the classroom community, that's something that they picked as an expectation, and students are falling behind, you can always remind the students and point to, whether it's in person, to that whiteboard, saying, we value completing our work on time. What's going on here? Why are we not doing so? Why are you not demonstrating that behavior? Of course, people have challenging dynamics in their homes during this period of time. We have to be understanding of that as well. So it could create those conversations where you're learning about some of the obstacles that they're experiencing outside of the classroom. And so, again, another way to build that connection with students and develop that relationship and that understanding. Also, with respecting others, sometimes you'll hear students teasing each other in ways that just for you as an educator, or maybe for some others in the room, just does not feel okay. And so we can always remind students, even if they think it's playful banter, that this is not acceptable. And, we really need to respect each other. And again, that's another way to create a safe classroom community. So I have students develop short-term and long-term academic and behavioral goals. And the sample Padlet is something that I did recently before the marking period 3. So in person, I have had my students chart and graph their summative essay progress to see if they see progress in a positive direction throughout the year. And then they set goals for themselves and how they can improve their writing and the things that they are seeing that are positive and also that require improvement. So they have an opportunity to reflect. Here, I had my students on a Padlet develop short-term goals for their third marking period success. And again, you'll be pleasantly surprised to see the things that they come up with, like not procrastinating, doing assignments that they typically don't necessarily love doing, like enrichment, like IXL, working on reading and writing skills, personalized reading and writing skills independently, wanting to stay motivated. Again, they will come up with some really great ideas for themselves, and they know themselves better than you do. One student mentioned, budgeting time better between school and sports, such as basketball. So Padlet's a great space for students to be able to do this kind of goal setting and reflection.
And at this point in time, we'd like you to engage in some of that reflection. So for our exit ticket, think about what are some self-regulation and connection practices that we've talked about today that you would like to incorporate into your planning for next year, for both you and for your students. This is a good opportunity to pause the video, reflect, and share your thoughts with your participants.
Welcome back. So another great way to build connections and join communities is joining our organization, the Connecticut Council of Teachers of English. We would love your involvement and to see you at workshops, in the conference, and other events throughout the year. And you can go right to the website, www.ctcte.net, to become a member and to see some of the events that are occurring. This presentation, as well as the first two this year, are also posted, and we will have the slides posted as well, so you can access the resources yourself and use them. The very next day, we want practical things that we can implement right away. So we are happy to help you do that work. So we will see you next time. Hopefully, we'll see you soon at the conference that's coming around the corner. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.